All right, welcome back. Another recording of Pencil Leadership. I'm your host, Chris Anderson. And this episode, we are going to be diving into a different topic, but one that's important and growing in the world today, especially among schools and educational systems. We've got Luke Hohmann on the show today, and he's the founder and CEO of FirstRoot. And this is an organization, a business that teaches financial literacy and civics through participatory budgeting, or PB for short. So, Luke, welcome to Pencil Leadership today.
Hi, Chris. Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. No, excited to just learn from you, share what you know with the audience and the importance of this participatory budgeting, and just a little bit about your journey too, because we're all about the journey to success and making a difference, leaving a mark in the world. And so I'm excited to dive in there, and we can get right into it. So FirstRoot obviously is your business.
Yeah.
What happened in life that sparked FirstRoot to start growing?
Yeah. So it's a more than a decade story.
Okay.
I started more than a decade ago working with large companies to help them collaborate better. And I wrote a book more than a decade ago that has had some moderate success in the Agile software development community and the product development community. And the book was called Innovation Games: Creating Breakthrough Products Through Collaborative Play. So I had designed a set of games to help adults solve problems. And the way I sometimes describe it is, imagine you were playing Scrabble, but at the end of the Scrabble game, your portfolio was prioritized, or you had a product roadmap, or you knew the right features to build in your product. Huh. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so what happened is people started using these techniques in the annual budgeting cycle of large companies.
Okay.
Which, if you've worked in a large company, it's an awful experience. You're supposed to collaborate with your peers for roughly 9 months of the year. And then when you get into the annual budget planning cycle, it all becomes not very nice, and you fight over the limited resources, and it's just awful. And so people started using these techniques internally within companies, big companies, which really have these huge problems, right? I mean, smaller companies, you can kind of get into a room and you work it out. But if you're working for a big multinational company, you've got a lot of complex forces, you've got geographic differences, you've got cultural differences. Mm-hmm. So they started using these techniques, and one thing led to another, and they asked me to build a software platform to help them manage their portfolios using these techniques. So I built a software platform with myself and some friends, and that became successful. So our clients were people that you would know of and have heard of: BMW and Salesforce and eBay.
Okay.
And then I was sitting on a plane ride, and the head of economic development of the city of San Jose, Kim Willesh, started telling me next to me on the plane ride about all of the challenges that San Jose was facing about prioritizing its city budget. This was way back in 2009, when we were still dealing with the economic crisis in 2010. And I said, just out of the blue, look, I do this for businesses. I'll do this for the city, and I'll do it for free.
Wow.
Philanthropically, because, not everything you should do in life is just because you're paid to do it. I think that's part of going back to the pencil leadership. Leaving your mark doesn't have to be, you shouldn't have to be paid to leave a good mark in the world. Yeah. And so we started doing it in cities, and then I started doing it in schools with my kids' schools. And I just got hooked on how powerful it was in taking concepts that are kind of abstract for kids, like a budget. And a lot of kids, they know that you budget money, but they don't budget like their parents, because they don't pay rent and they don't pay car insurance. And so a budget for a kid is like, yeah, whatever. My mom and dad do it. I get a little money. It doesn't make sense. I don't, it doesn't motivate me.
Yeah.
So rolling the clock forward, I sold the company that I had created with my friends in 2019. And that was a good outcome. Finished my integration tasks, and then started FirstRoot. And FirstRoot is devoted to using participatory budgeting to teach financial literacy and positive civic engagement.
Okay.
And it's this kind of magical process. And we've been talking about it. So I think we should take a step back and actually explain it to the listeners. Like,
yeah, that'd be great, because you could explain it to me too.
Like, what is this thing?
Exactly.
And, it's not like we drive by and toss out a roll of $100 bills to the kids and say, you'll figure it out, right?
Yeah.
It's a structured process. So it's got 5 phases.
Gotcha.
Phase 1 is planning, and we integrate the kids into the planning process, and we ask them questions like, who should be involved? Do you want the teachers involved? Do you want your parents involved? What should be the theme? Most of the time, we recommend that it's just the students to really reinforce that they're in control of the money and they're not being overpowered by teachers or parents. The students will create a theme, like about school safety or the school environment or educational resources. And that's phase 1, planning.
Okay.
Phase 2 is ideation. And this is where the youth generate proposals according to the theme. How could we make the school better? How could we get better resources? And those ideas are raw. So let's say, for example, one student says, we need new basketball nets for the outside basketball court. Okay. Then in the next phase, they go through a refinement process. Because if I walk up to you and I said, hey, I want new basketball nets, you'd ask me some really simple questions like, well, how many nets do we need? And who's going to install them? And how much do they cost? And where are you going to get them? So in the refinement phase, the students look at the proposals and they refine them. And this integrates a lot of financial literacy and a lot of civics, because we're going to ask questions also like, well, who benefits from this this proposal? Does the whole school benefit? Does a subset of the school benefit? Is it feasible? Is it desirable? Eventually, you're going to get to between 3 and 15 proposals that the students have refined well enough to vote on. Then we do a vote, and ideally, it's the entire school. Those were the students who were invited to participate. And it's a straight vote, majority wins. And then we go down the list of the results and we fund and we implement, according to the students' wishes, the proposals that they voted on. So they get to actually experience what a democratic process feels like when you have a positive engagement and you have a good outcome. Now, there's only 2 times where the parents or the teachers are actually invited to be involved. And the first is in the preparation of the ballot. We want to make sure that the school administration will implement what the students pick. So, and it sounds like that's nefarious or negative, but it's not. We had one example where the kids wanted to buy some new equipment for the chemistry lab. And the teacher said, no, don't buy that. We're planning on refurbishing the chemistry lab next year as part of our operating plan. So you shouldn't buy that. We're going to do that anyway. So that communication enhances the students' understanding of what the school is already intending to do. The second place that we want the parental involvement is in securing the budget. So the budget has to come from somewhere. Usually it comes from the principal's discretionary funds. It often also comes from the PTA or the PTO, the Parent Teacher Association, or the Parent Teacher Organization. And it comes from corporate sponsors or nonprofit sponsors. So for example, some schools in Chicago have done participatory budgeting with the Robert McCormick Foundation sponsoring them. I've done some work with schools here in California where Salesforce has sponsored some schools. We're doing a project in Utah where Lucid Charts, which is a software company, a really nice software company, they're sponsoring a high school. So we're starting to see people realize our democracy is at risk in 2 ways. One is this growing wealth and economic inequality. And the second is the lack of civic engagement. People look at Congress and kind of say, why should I vote? They clearly don't care about us anymore. They clearly don't really want to, do the things that we need to do as a country. And now, fortunately, city politics is still much healthier. And we do see people engaged in cities and get benefits from cities. And so our hope at FirstRoot is by giving kids these positive engagement experiences, they will graduate and want to be more civically engaged.
I think that's huge. I think that's an amazing platform and program. Just, and it's not funny, it's ironic, it's not a coincidence. So we're actually currently right now we're in August 2021, and we are in our city, our county, trying to get a humane society. We're one of the few that don't have it, and so there are meetings with the commissioners and the county that are going on, and we're having those meetings, and it's just an interesting interaction. This is the first time I've ever like even watched kind of basically one of these meetings take place and hear people present and all this, and it's something I never really was informed on. I mean, I had economics and I had government, but it just, the interaction, I think the hands-on what you're doing with this, I think that plays such a bigger impact, or has such a bigger impact. And what, because they have, you know, they have skin in the game. They're part of it. They actually, and that's awesome.
Skin in the game. And you know, for the people who are listening, you're not going to know what I'm doing. So I'm holding up my hands and I've got a pretty big gap. And Chris can see this, right? Everyone has these many ideas, and everyone has this much money. Right. It doesn't matter what part of life you're in. If you said to your partner or your spouse, and you said, hey, let's remodel our house, I guarantee you're going to create more cool ideas for a house remodel than you can afford.
Yep.
And we do that with our cities. And so, and we do this with our government. So we often celebrate when the kids have too many ideas. We actually tell them going into this, you're going to create a lot of good ideas and you're not going to be able to fund them all. And the goal isn't to just try and get more money. Sometimes it's also about realizing that the way to solve a problem is more than just buying your way out of it. And an example of that is we did a project with Hegel Elementary School in Madison, Wisconsin. So a bunch of fifth graders, which is really funny, watching a Zoom call of, you know, about 58 fifth graders voting and talking about their votes. But they chose, in their ideation phase, they wanted to get a tree for the school. They know where the trees are needed, right? They're the kids who play in the playground, not the parents. And then they realized that they didn't have enough money. But then one of the teachers realized that a parent was an arborist. So they got the parent involved, and the parent said, I'll donate the tree. And then the teacher said, well, come and talk to our class about what you do as a job, as a way to, you know, show the fifth graders there's lots of cool jobs. And then they showed a little bit of his talk, and it was really cool. He comes in and he says, you know, do you like working outside? Do you like nature? Well, I did. When I was in fifth grade, I really wanted to have a job working outside, and I didn't want to be a farmer because my dad was a farmer, but, you know, I wanted to work outside, and I love trees, and I ended up going to school and I became an arborist. And it was this amazing life story of a person doing a job they really love. And you could see some of the kids in the class, you know, being reinforced. Wow, I can do a job I love, and you know, and make enough to live.
That's so neat because, I think back to my days growing up, like you would learn about the, you know, the typical jobs, and especially for the area you're into, the typical SARS was, we have Chrysler close by, so car manufacturing, auto manufacturing plants, so factory job, or, you know, postman or mailman or things like that, school teacher. So you hear about the generic, you know, nothing wrong with those jobs, but there's so much more out there. And I think this, again, is another way to open our eyes, or open our children's eyes to the possibilities. Like, you don't have to follow and do exactly what everyone else has done. Like, there's so many options. And again, goes kind of ties with pencil leadership, as everyone's created unique with a purpose and special abilities. And so now we can tie it all together by being able to experience that through these interactions.
Absolutely. And, you know, when I was talking with you about being on the show, and again, thank you very much for having me. I really do resonate with the qualities of the pencil leadership, right? I love the fact that, and I kind of like the fact that you get worn down. Right? Like, you got to get sharpened again. And you have to, and I think that that's also an important thing for the kids to learn, because one of the nice things about participatory budgeting is it's a kind of schooling known as project-based learning, where you try to create a project to facilitate the kids' learning as opposed to just reading a book and taking a test. And it's funny, one school we work with, the kids wanted a 3D printer. I can tell you for sure by the next 2 weeks where they were doing their refinement and their research, they learned more about 3D printers than I thought you could learn.
That's awesome. That's so cool though. It's just, I like that aspect. And I have ideas for pencil leadership one day to do things sort of like this, go into schools and give back and show kids that there's more out there, that they can, take their passions and hobbies and turn them into something, as a career field. And so I love, again, what you're doing. And I'm curious, though, kind of circling back to when we talked about civic involvement, because you don't hear a lot of people talk about civic involvement or anything kind of civics wise. Why do you think there's a lack of civic involvement nowadays?
Well, we don't teach it anymore.
Yeah.
I think there's like there's that notion of what's called the Occam's razor. Like, what's the simplest explanation for a phenomena? I think there's a couple of reasons. One, we don't teach civic involvement. We don't teach civic engagement. We teach some structure of our democracy, like what are the three branches of the government, but we don't teach what it means to be a citizen. And I think that part of that started to happen when we started to say that the purpose of government was to be like a business, right? You hear about government services, and yes, of course, the government provides the services, and we pay taxes. But if you reduce the relationship that you have to the place where you live to be transactional, you forget that you have neighbors. You forget that there's a community. I feel very lucky. I live in Sunnyvale, California, which is in the heart of Silicon Valley, which makes sense, right? I'm starting a software company, but there's a lot of very silly behaviors in Silicon Valley, right? Too many rich people but our neighborhood is really tight. We have block parties. Our awesome. Neighbors know each other. Our kids know each other. We could walk to school. So we felt pretty civically engaged. I think the other thing that happens about civic engagement is social media, and especially Facebook, puts people into negative echo chambers where the algorithms of the way that Facebook makes money is through making your attention more volatile. They make money by getting you hooked into kind of a rage state. So what happens is people, even if they have a center right or a center left point of view, the engagement in social media is specifically designed by the engineers at these companies to create divisions, because creating divisions creates more revenue for ads. And so we're selling our future and selling our soul to advertisers, and a few tech companies are making hundreds of billions of dollars from it. And I heard a new term. And so speaking of growth and learning, I heard a new term. One of the investors in our company, and we're actively raising money right now, but one of the investors said, I'm investing in your company because I'm looking for family tech. And I actually said to her, I said, what is family tech? And she said, oh, family tech is this new kind of investment where you're building something that's healthy for families as opposed to something that's negative to families. And so her whole investment thesis is, she invests in healthy food and healthy, sustainable clothing. And apparently we were her first tech investment as a healthy tech company.
Wow. Yeah. It's an interesting shift, even from my perspective. I mean, I just turned 30, and looking back growing up and compared to, my wife's a teacher now in the middle school, just a difference in what they're taught. And it's just an interesting change, an interesting shift. And I think we need to do better going forward to educate ourselves and educate our children on these kind of topics, so we don't miss out.
And lest I'm always a person who likes to subject what I'm doing to research if I can. So research from Arizona State University has actually shown that high school students who are engaged through a participatory budgeting program do actually graduate and become more civically engaged. They graduate, they register to vote, they become involved in their community, and they actually do vote. So we have some evidence that this positive experience does carry over. And my vision is to do participatory budgeting and then at every grade level, so that as the kids mature, they become truly prepared to be as a citizen. Now, you said your wife is at the elementary school, right?
Middle
so maybe
school,
middle school. So middle school is different. But like if you start with, say, the fifth grade school, they're not going to know the complexities of voting algorithms, for example.
Right.
They're just going to know majority vote. But by the time you get to high school, you can actually talk about how other countries and other societies and other groups have done variations in voting. And we teach that in our curriculum. We talk about, well, what's a majority vote? What's a ranked choice vote? What's a vote swap? And what is the voting jurisdictions? What is gerrymandering? What, who gets to draw those lines and how were those lines drawn? And what is the implication of those lines? You're not going to talk to a third grader about that. You're not going to talk to, you may talk about some different ways of voting to a seventh or eighth grader, but you're not going to really bring in gerrymandering and stuff.
Yeah.
But by the time you're a senior and you're getting ready to go into the real world outside of school, well, these are actually topics that affect your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've always thought we need to have something that like this, and then that gives the kids opportunities to intern at different career paths. Because I mean, you come out of high school and people are like, all right, go to college for something and pick it now. And I'm like, these kids have like, I'm not doing what I went to college for. Like, there's so much out there. If we don't experience it, if we don't have those abilities or those possibilities to do that, how are they supposed to come out of high school knowing what they're going to do for the quote unquote rest of their lives? It's illogical, in my opinion.
It is. And I'm going to circle back. So we have two curriculum that we've developed, one for financial literacy and one for civics. And in the financial literacy curriculum, we've aligned to either state standards for a couple of the states that have state standards or the Jumpstart national standards. And jumpstart.org is an organization devoted to helping improve financial literacy. And one of the things, and we picked this up from the Wisconsin standards, is when you're in high school, there is a bit of a push to have college be your only path. But it's really not true, right? I mean, if you think about it, there's many paths. You could go into the military. You could take a gap year. You could take a 2 or 4 year college. You become an apprentice. You could move into starting your own small company. And so when we were taking a step back and building out our curriculum, we wanted to make sure that the students were exposed to more ideas than just, go to college, which is great, right? Of course, go to college is great. But there are other life paths that you can have. And what we find is that there are many people who felt shortchanged when the only things that were taught about this in business were like become an entrepreneur or go to college. Well, what if I want to become a mayor of a town and serve my fellow citizens? Again, bringing in civics. So there's a lot of career options for kids out there.
Yeah, I remember in elementary we did something like this where we went to, it was like a warehouse, but it had set up as a mini city. And so you had someone who was elected mayor through things, and I forget what it was called, but it was a really cool experience. I still remember I was like the head newspaper writer. And so like, it's just a fun experience. And I don't know, it opens up your mind, especially at that age, to like, again, just other paths.
Well, clearly it influenced you because look at you now, right?
I guess
instead of writing, you're on the cutting edge of media right now. You're podcasting and so you maybe that did influence you.
Yeah, it's true. It's like, I truly believe like we're really missing out on a lot of amazing things in the world because people don't realize that there's other paths they could take based on their possibilities, their potential in life, because they're just taught one thing, one way. And I really believe we're missing out a lot of beautiful stuff in the world from people because they just didn't know or weren't open. Their eyes weren't open to the possibilities.
They didn't get that chance. And so, we're clearly FirstRoot is not going to solve all of these problems all at once, but we've got a long-term horizon. We've got a long-term perspective. We do know that the other element of this is that, so what about if there's data about civics, is there data about personal finance or teaching financial literacy?
Yeah.
There's a really powerful study by the Federal Reserve of the United States where they studied the state of Texas, because Texas had no personal finance standards, and then they added them. And the Federal Reserve had the timing such that they could actually study what was the outcome before and after Texas started teaching personal finance to high school students. They found that the average student who goes through a personal finance program has a 15 to 18 point higher credit score and a 5% less likely chance of defaulting and declaring personal bankruptcy. And they actually said, in the study, like, this doesn't sound like much, but when you run the numbers, that's 40,000 Americans who didn't declare bankruptcy. That's 40,000 Americans who didn't have that, because it's a really hard thing to recover from if you actually get to the point where you declare bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And the ability to manage your finances well enough just to prevent a catastrophic outcome, it's pretty amazing.
And like, that just goes back to, again, we need this, because I learned how to balance a checkbook, write checks, things like that. But budgeting, I don't remember that being taught. And my parents taught a little bit and tried to. And I think that a lot of this needs to stem from home as well. But I think it's important that we need it somewhere, some sort of program like what you're doing. And it's just a topic that it's hurting a lot of people.
So let's actually dig into, like, why do we not teach personal finance, right?
Absolutely.
Well, if you roll back the clock, say a long time, like 100 years ago, what did you have? Well, you had a bank, you had a checking account, you had a mortgage. That was it. You had a couple of basic stocks. Credit cards and debit cards weren't even invented until the 50s, with the Diners Club being the first card. So the complexity of the financial system was such that it didn't make sense to teach it.
Yeah.
Right. We didn't need it. And of course, there was a certain overhang with your parents. You roll the clock forward, even for my mom and possibly for your parents, it still wasn't incredibly complex. There was more variation. We had credit cards. We had a whole lot of bad behavior. And now you're in kind of this very complex environment. The traditional banks are not your friend, because they make more money on bank fees and illiterate people. So they have no incentive to try and create a good outcome. And there's a pretty big gap between the strategies for managing a budget and the strategies for wealth creation. So low to moderate income people, they know how to manage cash in many ways, but they don't understand the strategy of how do I accumulate wealth. And so part of the reason that we have to break the cycle is it's one of those, old people saying, well, I didn't need to learn that, and I was fine. And they're like, well, yeah, you didn't.
Because you didn't have this kind of stuff.
You didn't have that complexity in your life.
Right.
Well, now we do.
Yep.
Right. And eventually it's going to go the other way around. We're going to be the old people going, well, I remember when we had to learn how to drive a car.
Yeah.
And our kids are going to be like, Dad, why do I need to learn to drive a car? It just takes me where I want to go.
Stick shift. I don't know how to drive stick shifts.
Really?
Yeah. I haven't learned how to drive a stick shift.
Oh, that was one of my fun. I have to share this story. So I grew up we didn't have a lot of money growing up. I'll leave it at that. And I remember my first car was a used Pinto, and it was a stick shift. And my sister is teaching me how to drive. So I have 5 older brothers and sisters.
Wow.
Right. Youngest to 6. And my sister's teaching me how to drive. And I get to the middle of the intersection and I pop the clutch.
Uh-oh.
And I'm really stressed and really tense. And of course, it's my sister. So she starts laughing.
Yeah.
And then I start laughing because I realize how absurd this is. So I'm stalled out at a Pinto in the middle of an intersection, laughing. And so finally some dudes just get out and push the car out of the way.
Yep. Oh man. Yeah. See, that's like, I would like to learn. I just haven't taken the time to do it, but and I wonder, kind of going back to like not being taught this kind of stuff. And again, I could be off. Do you think, and I hate to kind of go down this route, but I want your opinion. Do you think there's a correlation because a lot of schools are governed what they teach and the money that comes from the banks because of the illiteracy of individuals?
I don't know how strongly correlated that is. I would say that we do know that school funding is predominantly associated with property taxes, and property taxes are very unevenly distributed. So you do see a lot of poor schools fundamentally in poorer parts of the country, just because of the way that school funding works.
Yeah.
What happens then is you get this generational issue of financial literacy. Mm-hmm. So the way that we're solving it is at FirstRoot, we are a benefit corporation.
Okay.
And what that means is we have a stated public benefit of improving financial literacy and civics. Now, the way that we express that is we know that the home structure influences the kids, obviously.
Right.
So we make our app free for families.
Wow, that's awesome.
So if you want to do like planning a family vacation, planning charitable donations, or planning home improvement, things that you could get your kids into the conversation with and sit down and talk with them, you can use our app at home with your family to engage in these activities.
That's pretty cool. That's a really neat tool to give families. So that's pretty awesome. And I think it just starts, it starts those conversations with your kids, like about financial literacy and more about that. So bravo to you guys for creating that and giving that out. That's amazing. This is just a really intriguing topic, and I'm sure we could go on and on and on about it in different arms of civics and financial literacy. But with 5 phases and how you guys are attacking financial literacy and lack of civic involvement, just really, really cool. I'm glad we got connected because I don't know anyone else doing this at this kind of positioning. I mean, financial literacy a little bit and things like that, but what you're doing with civics and finances, both, it's a really cool topic. And so yeah, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Before we kind of say goodbye and everything, I do ask one question of my guests when they're on, with the 5th trait of pencil leadership being that everyone's created uniquely with a purpose to leave a positive mark on the world. So when everything is said and done for you, Luke, here on Earth, what do you hope your positive mark is? Yeah,
I was thinking about it, and I should let everyone know that Chris feeds you this question, so you do have time to think about it, which is nice. And it's a tough question for me because at one level, there's my own family. I have 4 great kids. I have a fantastic wife. We are blessed. One of the Hohmann family jokes is my wife used to say, "Are we rich yet?" And I always used to say no, and then she would like kind of hit me. And then I learned that when she says, "Are we rich yet?" I always say yes, but then a little bit more money wouldn't hurt. But we're rich we're rich in family.
Yes. Yep.
So leaving my mark would be one, just creating what every parent wants, right? Creating a future that is better for your kids and adults. Like you're building the next generation.
Yeah.
I also think that my legacy would be if we could make FirstRoot into a company that does help improve civic engagement. It does help people improve their financial position. And here's the thing, and this is kind of why I wanted to be on the show, because I think the people who listen to this show would resonate with the following. I hope they do. I want to get FirstRoot into every school around the world. There's no possible way we can do that on our own. We're not a big enough company. But all I need is one parent or one teacher or one principal to bring FirstRoot into their one school. And we don't need a lot of money. If you have $1,000 in your PTA, or if you have $2,000 in your principal's discretionary fund, or if you can convince a company to sponsor a school for $1,000 or $2,000, you have enough money for the kids to feel that they can do something.
Yeah.
And my hope of being on the show is that people could go to www.firstroot.co, go to our website, and just bring this concept and these techniques into one school.
Yeah.
And if enough people do that, it's gonna grow and it's gonna handle itself.
That's amazing. And again, I love that mission, and I love the path you're on to do this, because it's needed. It's needed. We're seeing the negative effects of it not being taught, and so we've got it. We need to educate ourselves and our children and the generations to come. And so, Luke, again, an honor and privilege to have you on the show, and grateful for you and your heart to change and leave a legacy for many years to come. And you mentioned that where people can go, firstroot.com, right?
.co.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
.co, firstroot.co, and check out what you're doing there, get connected with you. So everybody, please do that. If you know teachers, if you know administrations, share this, tag them in this video. Let's get in front of more individuals that can help Luke and his mission in schools, and we can do it together. We can leave a bigger positive mark together, and that's what being a pencil leader is all about. And so, let's do it together, guys. And Luke, again, thank you so much for being on Pencil Leadership today.
Thank you so much, Chris.
No problem. All right, guys. Like I said, share this episode, especially if you know any teachers or admins. I know I'm going to share it to my wife and get her to put it in front of her principal, and we can make a difference, guys. So let's do that. Let's go out